Today I want to talk about AI and UX, and especially the UX of AI. Sounds weird, but I guess all of you are in the whole thing about AI right now, and maybe some of you have been asked forcefully by your boss to put AI into bloody everything. So I think it's very important that we understand that this is a new part of our world, but it also means it's not a replacement for our world, and we actually should use AI in a sensible manner in our products rather than replace all of them with it. All the resources I'm going to talk about are in this QR code, so you can take a picture of that, or you can go to github.com, code code 7AFA09CC9A1, no, or you just take a picture of that. That might be the easier option. I wish GIST would get a better URL, but what can I do? So, hey, do you want to have a chat? Everywhere, all the time, and as your main interaction with computers? Because if you don't like to chat, tough luck. ChatGPT is the thing that replaces everything if you listen to the mainstream media. Because this is the fastest growing consumer app in the internet until a month ago when Threads came out, and that was the fastest growing app in the consumer app. And then 2 months later, they didn't have any users any longer, and ChatGPT is also bleeding money, but nobody's talking about that. There is no question that actually ChatGPT was kind of a perfect storm, that it became a thing where how people interacted with computers that wasn't there before, or not on that level and on that similar level. It was a wonderful experience to see it, and it shows how many good UX developers work in OpenAI. But it also was a perfect storm because web search gave up on providing real and free results. I worked on Yahoo, I worked on Bing, I worked with Google, and I was always very excited to when I discovered the internet in 1995, 1996, that I could type something in and find it. Nowadays, you type something in and you find 6,000 ads that might be the thing that you were looking for, but not the thing that you were looking for. Search engines have more or less given up giving us the results that we're looking for and show us things that we might like instead. And might like is nonsense most of the time. ChatGPT was also a great alternative to get that information. If I just want to cook pancakes, then basically asking ChatGPT what a recipe was like felt much better than having to click through thousands of pop-ups. Do you want to have a cookie? No, I came for pancakes. I don't want to do cookies right now. So don't annoy me with these scrolling things. And the interface appeared mock-human and very sci-fi. It was really cool to talk to the computer and interact with the computer, chatting with it. It felt like all the science fiction movies and TV shows, and people started loving that and loved that interaction, that they can interact with the computer and refine the results. And the results sounded incredibly useful. And that's one thing that I keep calling mansplaining as a service. All these ChatGPT systems say things that don't make any sense, but sound very lucid and very good about it. They're also very Californian. They never say no. They just say like, oh, this might be that, which might be complete nonsense again. But after chatting with it for another 3 minutes, you might start thinking, yeah, there's a point to that nonsense, but there isn't. It's a very, very clever language that is normally seen by televangelists or salespeople. So AI and voice recognition makes the web accessible to all is something that a lot of these things are saying as well. So somebody who cannot use a keyboard, who can not use a mouse, can now talk to their computer and get the voice recognition and that way interact with the computer. It makes computing human and people can interact with the machine. The irony of it is when it doesn't work. And there's Steve Faulkner did an analysis of the interfaces that we have, like ChatGPT and Google and Bard and also Bing Chat, with a screen reader, with a blind user that uses a screen reader, and they cannot use these systems, although we keep telling them, now that's working for everybody. And voice recognition is not as good as we think it is. It has come leaps and bounds, but it's still a very weird way to interact with a machine. My favorite is when you see science fiction movies and you see like robots talking to each other, and you're like, why? Why would I want to have one machine say something and another one record it and then turn it into code again? Even better is when you get these AI-generated images about AI, where you got a robot typing. And I'm like, teaching a robot to type on a keyboard is much, much harder than just making him send the data into the computer. This is just for the benefit of the viewer. So AI is here to stay, but the question is how? How is it going to be around? Is it going to be a log-in addiction machine like ChatGPT is right now, and Bing tries to be as well? Like we go to ChatGPT and we talk to the thing for 10 minutes to get like a recipe for pancakes that we could have gotten in half a second. And we don't even realize the time that we spent talking to the machine because it felt so cool. It's a bit like playing a gambling machine in the pub and you get addicted to it. Should it be a distracting helper? Like it's basically coming in all the time and say like, you're doing this, but actually you want to do this, or would you want to do something else? Should it be an automator of the obvious? Like when I press a button 5 times, should the machine realize that I should have basically that button as a 1-step process and not a 5-step process? Enhancement to existing use cases. Like what do I do already? Should AI make it easier to actually make that easier to use and to reach the goal? Or an eager listener and problem solver, like just a machine recording what I do and then saying like, you spent 13 hours doing these things with 3 emails. How about we do it automatically in the email system for you next time? I think the problem right now is that it's actually more noise and less helper. So this is what the Bing integration with chat looks like right now, and it's all over the place. Like when I scroll accidentally down, I get the chat interface that I didn't ask for. Okay, I go up again, and then I ask like if ChatGPT is actually available for a screen reader, and then I get an answer that ChatGPT is not working because of networking issues. I had a chat already starting in the front. I didn't know about that. I have something scrolling in from the side, and I don't get any single answer what's happening with the screen reader in ChatGPT. All the content is about like, oh, are you connected to the internet and stuff like that. So the machine is actually feeling desperate to give you results, no matter what the quality is. And that gave to me this flashback to when I worked on Yahoo Answers, or Yahoo Clever as it was called in Europe. We basically said, like, okay, let's analyze language and give people language from people back. So real questions, real answers. Wonderful product, really good idea. Then it didn't have enough clicks, and then they turned off all the quality control. And then it didn't matter what data was in there as long as there were clicks, and it became a joke really quickly. So the interface of ChatGPT became like this poster child how to do this kind of interaction. And it was a demo. It was not really finished yet. It was an experiment from the very beginning. And then Bart came around and did something completely different. They put rounded corners on it, but the interface was more or less the same. What is really fascinating, if you use Edge and you go to the Bart website, it actually tells you in the URL bar that the browser or Bing also offers the same functionality, and if you want to have the 2 things next to each other. So let's make the Bart GPT and the Microsoft GPT talk to each other, or why am I here? This is not a tennis game, but it's basically everybody wants to have a slice of that pie. So we overload the user with interface elements rather than keeping it to that simple chat interface. There's also browser integration in Microsoft Edge on the side, so there you can actually always chat with the Microsoft chatbot. And it kind of reminds me of something that was around for a long time, and that was Clippy. And Clippy was basically an interesting concept because it was the interface of Word was far too hard for a normal user or somebody not known to computers. So basically it said like, hey, you're writing a letter, shall I help you? But it became kind of a joke because it never gave you any sensible answers or sensible help. So it's kind of a UX bankruptcy, like, okay, our interface is too complex, let's put some shiny character in there that tells people how to use the interface rather than simplifying the interface. And it became an annoyance rather than a helper. And now we get Clippy, which is basically using OpenAI, and most of these systems feel the same. They're interrupting my day-to-day work and say like, hey, we can do that better. I can generate text for you. I can generate images for you to make your presentation more exciting. Presentations don't get exciting with images. They get exciting by what you have to say. So let's avoid the old traps that actually are happening there when you want to do a chat interface, which probably some of you have been asked by your boss to do. So AI-powered chat systems take a lot of time. You communicate a long time for a result that could be one web result if you think about it. And the faux typing is fun at first, but it gets annoying fast. Like when the machine starts writing text out to you, you're like, oh, that's like chatting with a person. That's great. But when you see it for the 50th time, and actually when halfway through it actually loses the plot and keeps telling me the same things over and over again, it gets really annoying. A lot of people can't see animations. They get nauseous, or their ADHD problem comes in. If something is animating, people get distracted. You cannot turn it off in any of those systems. This faux typing thing is something that everybody does. Let's get rid of it. The other problem is that discarded interaction doesn't mean positive experience. A lot of these systems say like, okay, if you talk to the chat system and you get a result and you don't talk to it any longer, it means you actually had the result. So let's upvote that result to be shown to the next user as well. I could be totally annoyed and really, really unhappy with the result and not want to talk to the machine. And that might be the other option. So that means that result shouldn't get upvoted. It's like when you have an argument with your partner and she or he says like, oh, is everything okay? And you hear like, yeah, everything is okay. Maybe ask another question. It's probably not everything is okay. It's not demanding context. It basically says like, hey, I can help you with anything and I can show you stuff from the internet. So the idea is to give it context to make it actually faster to understand. And it feels like going to Google and pressing the I feel lucky button because the first result is the result that you get. So this result should be damn good. And if it's not damn good, then your experience isn't positive and you're not going to come back to it. So an interesting thing is when you go to GitHub Copilot, there's an option to tighten the context. So you can actually use a chat interface to documentation of software. So in this case, you got the dev tools, you got Visual Studio Code, TypeScript, Superbase, React. And when you use that, the first thing they have is a filtering mechanism. And that's something that I think we all should do. That one allows you to tell you, I'm an immediate developer, I'm a novice developer, I'm an expert, I want a balanced response, I only want the information, or I want to learn. So instead of giving everybody the same result, we tailor it to the needs of the end user, and that way you get shorter and differently worded results. And if you get the chat interface in the attribution here, you basically can see that I say, how to use the fetch API, it gives me that information, but it also has these things on the side where I can say that's where it came from. This is where it in the official documentation, and you can copy and paste the code out there as well. So I have a validation that this is the right result because it came from the official documentation and not from Bob27 on Stack Overflow when he was drunk 3 o'clock at night and gave an answer that everybody wanted to hear. So what about developer tools? I worked on the Chromium developer tools and on Visual Studio Code, so I have a lot of experience in that. And I think in developer tools, when you want to spice them up with AI, the biggest problem that people do is not integrating with existing tool chains. So they basically interrupt your flow. They say like, go to ChatGPT, talk to it for 10 minutes, copy and paste that Python code out, and hope everything works. That's like going back to Stack Overflow. We didn't need the AI for that. Generating code versus aiding development. So here's a bunch of code. Hopefully it works. Hopefully it has no security holes. Hopefully it's good enough for you. And offering outdated, invalid, insecure, and unoptimized results. The problem with LLMs, that actually is the technology behind all these chat systems, is that they're super expensive to put together. It's lots of data. The data has to be trained, classified, has to be weighted by people to actually make sure the results are good. So most of those are outdated. So the ChatGPT 3.5, I think it's 4 years old by now, the data. So when you ask for a new API, you get like outdated results that are probably not working. I've seen actually attacks on GPT by asking it to create NPM modules or asking for NPM modules that don't exist. And actually it started then to tell other users about these NPM modules, and the attackers would write malware as this NPM module, and you use ChatGPT to distribute malware that way, because there's no validation step. So there are several ways how AI actually is used inside developer environments. This is Visual Studio Code with Copilot. So the thing is that you can do is you can have a function and you give it a name and it generates the function for you. And then you can take a look at it and say like, hey, what's that? I learned about the share API from that. I didn't know that existed before. So that's actually really useful. Just give it a proper name for one function, a nice modular little thing. The other thing that you can do is do a function via tab completion. So you can write the function and then you actually share to, in this case, share form. And then you actually get bit by bit the information. Okay, this works. What's the next step? Yeah, that makes sense as well. So you basically have kind of a guided coding with the machine rather than just getting one block that you have to look it up yourself. There's also inline creation via prompt, and I really love this. Like instead of having to go to ChatGPT or go to an extra window and start chatting with the machine or the sidebar in the browser, you can press Command I in your machine, and then you can say like inside your code, create a share to Facebook, to Twitter here. And then it actually creates that function for you. It also takes the code around it and the other files that are open in the code space into consideration. So it will write the code according to the style of the other things around it. And you get, as you can see, you can get a diff view first, so you can keep editing it and then get it into your source code. So it doesn't override your functionality. You have an extra step to say yes or no to it. And that's a very important thing. You don't want machines just to generate code and override your other code. There should always be a human at the end saying yes or no. You can also comment things. So in this case, you can just do the inline command again and say, this is a function that I have. It should be commented, so it's easier to understand. So you do command I again, and you say comment, add comments, and it will then create English comments according to that. I haven't tried it yet. It might be actually, if you set it to another language, it will actually create comments in other languages. But that's a dangerous thing because it's written in America, so we never know what they came up with. So the other thing is you can use JS doc comments. So if you just highlight, if you just highlight that and say like do a doc, and then it actually creates the JS doc style comments on top of it, and that's the big hoo-ha that people have with TS versus JavaScript right now, where you have to use these doc comments. And writing them by hand was something that was never fun. That's why I stopped using Java, because I didn't want to write this kind of syntax by hand. You can also have it explain things to you. So you can say like highlight this code, do like again the command I and say like explain it. And then it opens it in the sidebar and actually explains what the code is and explains to you bit by bit what it does. This is a great way to get people into a code base, to learn how other people in the team work, and so on and so forth. Code referencing is, of course, very important as well. So you write a bit of code, and it tells you that is actually open source code we found on the web. This is the package that uses it. That's the license of that package. So make sure that you're allowed to use it because you're using a similar license, or you're not allowed to use it. So instead of just stealing random open source code, it actually tells you where it came from. Code workflow integration is another thing that annoys me as a developer. Like I write some code and I can ask Copilot to do a summary for it, and also to do an explanation of changes, so a walkthrough. So it will then analyze my code, and then it will actually write a summary what the code changes are, and it actually will write a summary of the explanation of changes and how a reviewer can actually do step-by-step analysis of my code. So that's stuff that I always had to write myself, but it's very generic to a degree. It's sensible, it makes sense to have it, but it costs me a lot of time, and that actually makes it much easier. Terminal integration is another really interesting option where you can say like question mark, and give it a prompt, and then it will generate a bash script for you and explain step by step what the bash script does, and then you can immediately execute it. So instead of having to look that up and copy and paste it into your terminal, you can use the Copilot integration directly in the terminal. And I love that you can actually see it before you execute it, so that's another very important part. They did a huge write-up of that, like a guide to designing and shipping AI developer tools, of all the user research that went behind it. And I wish they had done that earlier, then I didn't have to do all the screencasts myself. Now, authoring tools are another big thing. In that case, not code authoring, but writing. And the biggest problem, I get a lot of people that ask me to test their stuff, and I had like one of them, like, we're the AI writer in the future, and you write a lot of blog posts, can you help us? And the thing didn't even have copy and paste. Like, it was a really bad text editor to start with. So start with a really good interface and enhance that one. Visual Studio Code was a great editor, and then all the other functionality came on top. How the editor, how fast it loaded, how fast it allowed you to scroll through code was the most important bit. Other writers disrupt the writing process. So while I'm typing, it tells me the auto-completion could be 5 paragraphs of nonsense. Do you want to have that? That's not a good idea either. And they generate tons of text without style matching. So they don't match the style how I write, but they just say, oh, you want to talk like a Californian guy who had illegal substances. That's basically how most of the generative things sound. And it repeats content. Oftentimes I see like generate stuff, and the first paragraph is great, and then there's 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then the same content of the first paragraph comes again and again and again. And you're like, okay, that's bad too, so make sure that you don't do that. One of my favorite editors is called Hemingway. That is actually a text editor that shows me how readable my text is, how simple my English is, how someone who reads it, what kind of education they would need to understand my text. So it actually shows me when a text is too long, like the first one. It shows me when there's passive voice. It shows me when the sentences are hard to read, when I use too many adjectives. And it shows me in all of these like how I could improve it, but it didn't tell me that it couldn't do it for me. But in the latest edition, it now has an integration with an LLM. So basically, I can now click on that or long click on one of those and say like, fix it for me. And then it actually rewrites the sentence for me, and it shows me the grade it needs now. So this was postgraduate, and now it's grade 9. And you can actually use that suggestion then and just replace that sentence. And you can do that bit by bit with each of the sentences in your text. And it's a much better way than just getting a block of text that you have to understand yourself. You can also let it generate things. So you say like, okay, continue writing, like take the text that I have and then actually start writing things according to the text that I started with. And that's another great thing to do, but ironically, it doesn't actually follow its own rules, so the generated text is actually too complex for Hemingway, so it actually generates it, so you have to go back and clean it up again. So that's something I'm working with them to make that easier as well. I see an emerging convention in these kind of things, which is slash commands. Like the slash command will normally in any of these AI editors allow you to access functionality. So in Copilot, it gives you access to functions like explain, fix, and so on. And in Hemingway, it actually allows you to continue writing and other functionality that might come soon. This is great, but there might be a findability issue. Like command palettes are in almost everything. They're in the developer tools, they're in Visual Studio Code. They allow you to use the keyboard to access all the functionality of a tool. But most people don't know about them that are not keyboard users. But it's a very powerful thing to do. Also in Edge and Chrome, if you do Command-Shift-A, you can actually search through all the tabs that you have open. And if there's one of them playing songs, that will be the one on the top. So you don't have to hunt through all your tabs anymore. So these kind of menus are in everything, but people don't know about them. How about video tools? Video tools, I think the biggest problem is to get these generating videos without editing options. So you say like, you give it a prompt and it creates you a video. I've seen one that generates like training videos with a very creepy avatar person that doesn't blink and looks into your soul all the time. And it's just, oh, please trust the machine to generate something nice rather than something editable is something that those do wrong. And they're offering the same as filters in chat systems to a degree. It feels like getting a dog face on top of something else. And we probably all saw the intro of Secret Wars in Marvel, and that was AI generated with an old Mid-Journey version. It just looks wrong still. And it creates packaged contents without tracks, so I can't actually separate the different video tracks. I get like just one video. What I love to use is Video Tab, and that is actually quite amazing what it does. So I upload a video to that thing, and then it realizes a video is a starting format. You want to do a lot of stuff with a video, not just put it on YouTube and hope people come. So what it does is it generates a transcript. That's a feature that almost every video editing tool does these days. YouTube does that as well. But then it also generates subtitles, which are actually timed to the audio that are happening there, that you can export and then you can actually put into YouTube as well. And it also creates social media tidbits. So it actually analyzes the text and gives you tweetable things about your video. Like at that second, you talked about that one. At that second, you did that. It also does a meta summary, like for the social media meta tags. And it actually does a YouTube meta content for you, all the things you've done by hand before. And also it does the chapters for you here that you can copy and basically put into YouTube immediately. What's really amazing is that it also creates a blog post from the video. So it actually uses ChatGPT or an LLM in the background to run the transcript to it and turn it into a blog post with like pull quotes. If there is a code example, I can do a screenshot by grabbing from the video and just include it in my blog post there. If I talked about a URL, it becomes a link. If I showed some code example, it becomes an editable code block. So it analyzes not only the text, but also the functionality and the semantics of it. You see it's got a 1, 2, 3 here rather than just the text. And then you can copy and paste that as Markdown or as HTML and use it as a blog post just from starting with the video rather than the other way around. It also has a clips for promotion feature. So you can actually get short videos. It detects a few of them automatically that have subtitles then. Or you can go to the transcript and actually create a clip. So you can highlight part of the transcript and generate a video from that. So if I now go to the transcript here and I just highlight a bit of it and say like, okay, that sentence sounds good, I can then basically say create a clip. And it creates a short video from that with the subtitle and blinking where the word is. You can change the colors, you can change all the bits around it, and you can create a video that you put on Instagram or some other social media bit from that text that was part of your video. So basically we turn a video into long form using AI. Wonderful tool, really fun to have, really nice team as well. So I asked them about features and 2 days later they're in at the moment. Graphical tools have the same problem. They generate destructively. They just generate an image for you, but you have no layers. You have no way of editing them. There's full page versus components thinking. So basically, it's just one image. And there's an alternative called OpenDream, which is an open source interface to Midjourney, I think. Oh, no, to diffusion models, to other OpenDreams. And that actually generates images but gives them to you as layers. So you can turn them on and off, and it becomes like an editable thing you can use in Figma or an editable thing you can use in Photoshop, whatever you use. Locofy is a company that I work with on generating components from Figma files. So you can actually have a Figma design and it analyzes it and says like, that's obviously a button. Shall I create a React component that's a button for that? That's a heading. Should I make that an HTML heading? That is a tab control. Should we use a tab control from your design guidelines to actually use that? It takes almost everything. It takes like Figma, Adobe XD, Storyblock, and turns it into a design and then runs it through the system and allows you to create components in different web frameworks. And I kind of like that because our designers have become so good in componentizing things, and then we normally just get a picture, and as developers we start writing components again. Why? We could convert one component to another component, and that's where AI comes in this case. So if you want to include AI in your products, try to stand out with good UX and local relevance. That's another thing, like people are super excited about OpenAI, but if you, for example, go to Czech Republic or Poland and you try to talk to them in their languages, they're absolutely atrocious. You could be a market leader for a small market if you use an AI system in those languages that gives people the results that they want. The Americans are not going to care about Poland or Czech Republic because the market is far too small. But for a company in that country, making an AI system for that country, it's probably a good idea. A friend of mine runs a chatbot for Vienna chatbot, blah, and that one is actually a ChatGPT integration for the city. I haven't tried it myself yet because Austrian is weird compared to German, but it seems like he's having a really, really good success with that. So this can be a revolution. This can be actually a change in computing from the very beginning. Or it could actually be another hype with lots of wasted money and energy and many a forgotten startup that disrupted too hard. Because the fastest growing startup of today is the one that struggles finding users tomorrow. And that's all I had, so thanks very much.